So we're joined here today with Carl Miller, author and AI specialist is what I'm going to go with. Author of The Death of Gods, an incredible book around how, not so much that the death of gods, but how it's been replaced by the new god, which is AI, and how it's going to be changing our lives. Carl, I'd love to start with, give us some context into your view of what AI actually means, because AI is a very broad umbrella of obviously artificial intelligence. But I'd love for you to, in layman's terms, talk to me as if I don't know what an LLM is, what agentic AI is, and how those things all fall into the umbrella of AI.
Well, Aaron, everyone, thanks so much for having me. And obviously you can hear the kind of hubbub of Web Summit around us. So this is like, there's no probably more AI place in the world than where we are right now. So the end of the story, of course, is that it's kind of changing the economy around us. And there are just thousands and thousands of companies here that are all seeking to use AI one way or another to kind of change the way that the economy works. But at the very beginning, we might have used AI, we might have used kind of cybernetics as a phrase. Maybe we're talking about machine learning. I mean, fundamentally, it is the process of trying to teach machines how to learn. And that's been a long process. It's been decades. You know, there was the AI winter of the 1970s, you know, go all the way back to the 1950s. And people like Alan Turing back then were hypothesizing and conjecturing about the capacity of human beings to be able to teach machines. In fact, actually, I would put the origin of AI at the origin of computing in America in 1959. And I visited the place where I think it began to happen. It's called the Tech Model Railway Club. Okay. If you go to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, you're standing on this dusty, windswept kind of a crossroads. There's a beat-up Sunoco gas station on one corner, and there's this kind of very nondescript door, chrome door. You go through this door, you go down a long, dark corridor, and you get to this room, and it says TMRC. And you open that door, and you see this giant railway, model railway set. Huge, like 20 meters long. And there are hills, and there are gullies, and there is a village, and there's a town. And this was where the first computers were wheeled out of the military labs. And suddenly, this whole bunch of undergrads in MIT were like, oh my God, what is that? It was the first time that human beings basically got their hands kind of on computing. And that's the beginning of hacker culture. The hackers formed there, the value of hacking, the idea of like writing software quickly, iteratively, sharing it all, like so many of the values that every engineer and every kind of like developer around the world would think is like complete standard about software and computers began there. And also, that was where they began to conjecture right at the very beginning that AI was going to change everything. That AI was going to be possible.
So the proverbial Pandoras Box.
The Pandoras Box opened as soon as the box was created. Yeah. So right from the very beginning, they peered into this computer. They were so interested in working out how it worked, what it could do. And from the very beginning, I think they also asked the question, is the computer one day going to be kind of peering back out at us? But will it wonder where it's getting these instructions from? Will it begin to think about what the world is like around it? You know, so I think AI has been the kind of like an elemental thread around computing as long as there's been computing. And of course, there's a technical story here. You know, we could talk about all the different ideas underlying AI. We could talk about how in the 70s they were trying to do symbolic logic and they were trying to like program more principles into the computer, how that didn't really work. We can talk about the kind of huge breakthroughs in transformers and that being mixed with parallel computing. There is a technical story, you know, and then we could talk about LLMs and ChatGPT landing and just how shocking that was. But I think from the very beginning, we've always really tried to teach computers how to learn.
Yeah, so what I would love to know is, we all recall the November, I think was it 2023?
2022.
2022, of very rare that a company can get Google to come out and dance and embarrass Google. As somebody that is so engrossed in the industry, was it shocking to you whenever OpenAI and ChatGPT landed? Like, or did you know that something was coming down the track?
Yeah.
Or was it like oh, they've got it? Or at least this is the start of the early adoption phase of these things becoming more prevalent?
We've been hearing things. So I work in a team of natural language processing engineers. And they are like very academic, but they're very interested in the kind of underlying approaches. And they were beginning, like, I remember like one of my colleagues, he's been doing NLP since 1983. And there was a particular task in NLP that he was like looking at. It's called the covered word challenge. So this is when like you basically cover a word in a sentence and you ask an algorithm, guess what the word is.
Yep.
And he used the word, he's not a excitable man, I think he wouldn't mind me saying. He's a dour Scotsman. And he used a word, which I remember to this day, which was, it looks like witchcraft. Right? He was like, it looks like witchcraft. He said, I never thought I'd live to see like the performance, which seems to be coming out of these new so-called large language models. And I didn't really put much store by that. Like I don't think you can like feel in the same way in an academic paper, like how capable it was, even when you can see the numbers going up, you can see the graph spiking. But then when it landed, yes, I mean, that was obviously a moment that changed the world.
And then we obviously live in a time of the technological acceleration of things. Get like iPhones coming out every year. Now we can argue whether they're actually any good every year or if they're any, but it seems to be that it's almost on a weekly basis that we're seeing, whether it's Claude, Gemini, Perplexity, OpenAI, obviously, that it's sort of this arms race between all of them of trying to get the parity with one another. But even that pace of change and that pace of development, it almost seems like ridiculous. Like how it's almost as if they've built these things years ago. It's in a backlog, and we're just going to drip feed them out. But it's quite obvious that that's not the case. I'd love to get your take on, can this sustain? Can this level of new additions of technology being released actually sustain itself? And where does that work? And so we have to hit an inflection point at some point. Like,
Sure.
we can't be bringing out things in the past.
Sure. I mean, the battle of the benchmarks, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, for those like outside of the world of AI, might not know that there are hundreds of these benchmarks now that are kind of being dynamically generated every day. That every single one of these models is desperately trying to outcompete the others on. And they're everything from the amount of hallucinations through to how well it's able to do active learning, through to how well it's understand large amounts of text, the context window, so many different aspects of it. I mean, it's very hard just to keep up with how it's being evaluated, let alone what the evaluations really are. I think that in a weird way, by the way, reflects how vulnerable the frontier companies feel that they are.
Yeah.
I think we think, often, oh my God, ChatGPT and Anthropic, they're giant, they've got all the money in the world. But I think like they feel like they are one bad benchmarking week away from, all the attention going elsewhere, especially with all this interesting technology that's happening with routing.
Yeah.
So people just switching models almost without realizing it, But I think there's another thread. So yes, there is a kind of burning, breathtaking technical development, which I think will level off. That's my cards on the table. I don't think that we're going to see the same performance over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
There's some signals for that. I might be wrong. But I think the other thing that's interacting with this so powerfully is the kind of social change that's happening at the same time. And I think like where I'm really fascinated is the use of these models in a kind of social or therapeutic or friendship or romantic way. And I think like actually the emergence of ChatGPT in 2022, like that was actually two shocks, not one.
Yeah.
It was a kind of technical shock, of course, how good these models are. But what I also didn't think we really realized was the depth of the relationships that people were willing to build with AI. And like now, I mean, they also landed, like that 2022 was not only a year of, it was one of the loneliest moments in the history of humanity. People felt so atomized, so isolated, and we can see now, like some of the, really, I think there's often danger with us talking about these things as simply being, knowledge gathering units or kind of analytical powerhouses. They're also for so many people like a new friend or a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And I think that is even more breathtaking to me.
I agree completely. It's one thing that I was actually talking with Dan Bennett yesterday, the behavioral scientist.
Oh yeah.
Around this new phenomenon, which is, no, I'm not going to say that's a scientific term, but GPT psychosis, where people, again, going back to your book, about they will treat it as it's the word of God. Like it is, it cannot be wrong. So people that have fed their medical records, they've fed their financial records, they've They will psychoanalyze their partners, their romantic partners, their business partners within these models, and then the problem that you have there is obviously you get ChatGPT, Claude, all of them are only as good as the prompt that you put in. They're only as good as the data you request and how you request it. It's not like, is this person bad? You need to give the context around it in order to have that full understanding and knowledge, and in order to get there as well as it can the correct response. And I will admit that this has been something that I initially found on TikTok as a thing, and then subsequently went and researched it.
Thanks for admitting that, Aaron.
No, I'm not gonna BS anybody here, but it's more of the case of these. It's kind of like your mother on Facebook, where it's like screaming into the void almost sometimes, and them not really getting what Facebook was for. It's like, what time does the big Tesco's close up?
Mm-hmm.
You Google that. People not really understanding what ChatGPT is actually for, and not understanding the context behind it of this is something that's designed to be either a jumping off point, or you give it the actual context, all of the data and all of the data points, and specifically request it not to be biased on things and be critical in order to get the right information. But these people are falling into this trap of, this is the word of God, and this is what I should do. It's not taking the creative element of, okay, it's not what I might be getting told from ChatGPT is 100% possible, but is it practical? Is there points of failure in it? And is it something that you should really be making business decisions, romantic decisions, or fundamental life decisions based on, or just something that should be a nice sort of like a nice way to have that conversation and then go and have that further conversation.
100%. And, we often see, whether it is social media or it is LLMs, we see there to be different interests wrapped up in the way these things are designed. And I think of all of that, probably the most invisible thing that we often don't realize is happening is just quite how much these platforms, whether that is an LLM or whether it's a social media company, need to keep us on the platform.
Yeah.
So Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, they are, one of the most amazing stat I've heard in Web Summit this year was, for every 1.2 items served up by TikTok or Instagram, we click on one. So they've almost solved attention. It's unbelievably efficient now at learning what attention we want to spend. But what it serves up is trying to keep you there, which might not have your best interests at heart.
Yeah.
It doesn't have society's best interests at heart, for sure. The first talk I gave at Web Summit was about how algorithm preferment is basically causing social polarization, it's causing radicalization, it's causing all kinds of social ills.
Yeah.
And I think that my deep worry at the moment is how that will now replicate into LLMs. So I don't know per se whether, ChatGPT, say Claude, is going to be the worst offender. I suspect they won't be. But underneath that, there's a long tail of companies who are developing much more specifically and deliberately products which are trying to build a friendship.
Yeah, and then just following on from that, how do you see the sort of, whether it's it's just a social atrophy of people's social skills, or even their attention span? We touched on TikTok. I will say that I call it brain rot. I was watching a TikTok of Family Guy with Subway Surfer playing beside it while Family Guy was playing on the TV. And my other half took a picture of me, and I've hit peak brain rot. Like my attention span is that of a goldfish, and that's being unfair to goldfish at this stage. So with that attention, even whenever now I go into YouTube, it's YouTube Shorts, and the attention atrophy, the being able to I'm lucky that I'm from that generation where I can recall going out and touching grass. But for the generation today, they've never grown up with anything other than tablet in their hand, mobile phone in their hand. That ability to have a conversation and hold a conversation with your peers or with somebody older than you, it does seem to atrophy, and it's hard to see how you rectify that, or at least attempt to put safeguards in place for that.
Yeah, the implications are clear. We can see anxiety going up, depression going up, loneliness going up. The irony, I think, Aaron, of our age is we live in both the loneliest and most networked moment that humanity's maybe ever had.
Yeah.
In terms of rectifying it, I think that, well, firstly, just to diagnose it first, none of that is accidental. You know, if you go to Stanford and you look at the Persuasive Technology Lab, you will see a whole academic discipline that is dedicated to trying and work out ways of making technology more habit-forming. And every single app that you use, probably on a daily basis, has like compulsive, like kind of habit-forming elements very much designed in. The infinite scroll, habit-forming. You know, swiping up to refresh your emails like a one-armed bandit. I mean, there's a long list of these. There are things we can do to fix it, though. I mean, in the UK, there's, I think, a strong movement now at the grassroots level to everyone to basically not give their kids smartphones until 16. The Australians look like they're going to legislate on this and actually ban social media for children. What I tell everyone is just turn the color off on your phone.
Yeah.
You know, you can actually make it a lot less addictive quite easily just by going to grayscale.
Yeah. I find there's the way a sponsor or a partner of Hurry, but I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the company Brick.
Yes.
So the little RFID readers.
Yeah.
What I'd find whenever my day would be controlled based on what emails I woke up to, and I was the classic wake up, phone, emails. That would then determine how good or how bad my day was going to be. And I knew this. And I've known that for a while. So what I decided to do was I got a Brick, would scan it whenever I went to bed, had another one on my desk in the office. By the time I got to the office, I've been in the gym. I've got that release of serotonin and endorphins, and unbrick my phone. Completely changed how my mood from the start of the day, because I was now ready to tackle those things rather than being the compulsive grab and just go into insanity almost at that stage. So for me, that's definitely been a big help on my side. One of the things that I'm as a company that works with agentic AI and works around actually giving you context around your data and giving you the understanding and then the ability of how to actually utilize that data in a more effective way. A concern that I do have is with the prevalence of the frameworks that now exist, whether it's Claude's API, whether it's OpenAI's API, we have so many companies, which to an extent is a good thing, so many companies that are popping up that are trial and error, but they're in essence a wrapper around ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. The concern that I have is that very quickly the agentic side of the market will start to be viewed as what Web3 was, or what Web3 is viewed as now, which is it looks like a scam. If it claims it's going to do something, it's probably not going to do it. We're being sold these things that say they're going to do something, but they're not going to be sold. They're not going to be able to do that. Which kind of feeds back to the "Are we in an AI bubble?" type of question. I would love to get your take on that. Of sort of how does a company that is building authentic, genuine, AI-powered tools try and stand out from the noise? So the obvious answer is do what you say you're going to do, but a lot of the time you have to get past that the fact that a lot of these people have already been burned and they don't want to adopt things, and we've seen the sort of already the retraction of companies that had started out with their AI initiatives and have rolled back very quickly because they've been sold something that wasn't actually there.
100%. I mean, this is the peril of hype. You know, hype will always, in almost like by definition, I think, like lead to disappointments in some way. And like, I think it is like one of the like, I don't know, it's like one of the like, it seems like an inalienable aspect of tech that like we're just always being surrounded by this hype. I mean, like Web Summit is full of stuff that's going to change the world and full of stuff that is incredibly hyped at the same time.
Yeah.
So I mean, this isn't going to be like, this isn't going to make any front pages tomorrow, but like, I think the reality is AI is both going to change the world and be a massive disappointment. You know, and I don't think there's any other way of seeing it.
I think we can. I mentioned this with Dan Bennett yesterday. It can be encapsulated with. We all remember the news stories whenever OpenAI came out. It was going to help us cure cancer faster. We were going to develop so many more medicines at a lot more pace. And then, 4 or 5 weeks ago, Sam Altman will let you do porn now. Like that to me encapsulates that exact thing of both being incredibly powerful but we need to an extent, that's for them to try and monetize a company that's in sort of like a circular economy type thing now, with NVIDIA chips being paid for by Oracle money, and that circular economy that's going on with OpenAI. But still, it's a bit crazy for me, the fact of we went from we're going to cure cancer to you can now create illicit content.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that, so I never, I always thought the Web3 seemed mostly silly.
Same.
I mean, like the NFTs were ridiculous.
The apes, those weird.
The apes were ridiculous. And you would see, like, I've talked to all these companies that'd be like, we're putting real estate contracts on the blockchain. You'd be like, it's just a contract. It's like, it's not fixing an actual problem.
Yeah.
Most of the time, like, it's just contract law in my eyes. It's like, we already know how to do ownership. It's very cheap. You don't have to pay a blockchain-based technology company in order to do it. I would say, like, amongst all the hype in AI, there definitely are now, I think, extremely clear cases about how there is already, like, seismically changing new capability. I'll give you one example. This was one of the times where I really stopped and I was like, oh my God, this is changing everything right now in front of our eyes. So I was in DEF CON over the summer. I don't know if you've heard of DEF CON. I don't know if people listening to this know about DEF CON, but it is the largest convention of hackers that happens once a year. You go to Vegas and it's like they're all like shot blue mohawks and blockchain tattoos, and like stuff starts getting hacked all over the place, and they try and hack your phone. I've never admitted this, but my phone was hacked at DEF CON this year. I ended up sending about 30 Uber Eats orders. That serves me right. It was actually my card. I got my card out to buy a bottle of water because it was 54 degrees. Anyway, on a stage, the first thing I saw there was DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, handing I think it was a $6 million check to about 10 18 to 20-year-olds, because they just won this big competition. And the competition was basically to tune and prompt an LLM to completely automatically find vulnerabilities and patch them in code. And they'd set up all these code repositories, like really well-known public repositories of code. And DARPA like injected them with tons of vulnerabilities, right? So they set these things off, and when the machines come back, they have the winning team. They had found not only all of the introduced vulnerabilities, they'd found actual genuine vulnerabilities in the code that no one ever noticed. In like SQL, they found a vulnerability in SQLite, like a code base that people use every day. I mean, totally crazy. And like that to me, I know that's like quite a cybersecurity specific problem, but basically just to reduce that down for people, that means that the future of all of our safeties online is going to be a question of competing offensive and defensive models constantly scampering over all the code we use. It's purely mathematics from this time onwards.
Yeah.
There is nothing to stop people just rolling thousands of these agents out.
So I suppose an interesting sort of way to take the conversation over here is we obviously live in a part of the world where our governments do tend to try at least and police these things. They don't do it well. They don't do it quickly. And the concern that you then have is people that don't fundamentally understand the technology trying to put safeguards in place which have good intentions, but they're too late, they're overzealous, they are overarching, whereas you will have other countries which will not name, but I think people will know who the sort of the bad actors afterwards.
The country is Russia.
Yeah. Who will just I don't want to get hacked here.
I mean, I've done plenty to annoy the Russians.
Yeah. So, like, what from that perspective, like, how do you find that balance of being able to keep people as safe as you can without losing we're in that Cold War era.
Yeah, for sure.
So of this arms race of who has the best AI to take down the other person's AI. So how do we go about managing the populace who do want to have some sort of safeguards in place from our perspective, with that who, there's no, if the populace starts to say that in Russia, they're just not going to be listened to.
Yeah, I mean, we're never going to deny bad actors access to frontier models. I mean, I think that's just obvious now. So you've already got Worm GPT. It's being used to generate offensive, malicious code all over the place. I think the good news, though, is, well, so it's actually stepping back just one moment. I mean, I don't want to sound too histrionic about this, but so I spent a lot of time in Death of the Gods, subsequent investigations, like working. I was embedded in a cyber crime team for a while. I then did a big investigation into assassination markets. I've come back from all of that, basically thinking we're living through one of the worst crises of law enforcement in the history of modern policing, for exactly the reason that you said, and I think it's very important. I think it's often not to do with the skills or even maybe the technology, it's geography.
Yeah.
You know, so often, you know, crime on the internet, like anything on the internet, kind of passes across borders so easily. We now have like Russian hackers victimizing like thousands of citizens across liberal democracies, you know, and we can't reach back out and actually do anything to them.
Yeah.
I would say the solution in general is that we need to. I've been very unpopular for saying this in the past. I once said this in an event in Parliament and got catcalled. We need some kind of justice without jurisdiction.
Yes.
So we need to actually find ways of reaching across borders and levying some kind of cost and punishment on people that we have no reasonable hope of bringing into a courtroom in Ireland or the UK.
I mean, but we have tried that in the, not in the real world, but in like in the more of a physical element with like the Hague, the International Criminal Court, and we've seen even in the past couple of years how that's not taken seriously. So we do need that an element of actual enforcement or some sort of
We do. We badly need it, yeah.
And then you've also got the extension that it sort of speaks more to the cyber security side of things. Of, I don't think people understand that the majority of internet traffic travels along actual physical cables,
Yeah.
embedded
Very fragile one.
at the bottom of the ocean. And there's been stories, I believe, in the past I mean, they're probably always playing around with it, but of Russian submarines being off the coast of Ireland, and the vulnerability of just having a cable in the ocean that you could cut off, and then the chaos that would cause with financial transfers, data transfers, the communications that we have now. Like, there's very few analog ways of communicating with people. It's all digital. That is a major vulnerability of ours, and it's actually shocking that we haven't had more happen from that perspective.
It's huge. I mean, like Tonga, a couple of years ago, there was a big earthquake. Huge amounts of silt and rocks fell across, I think, a 12-mile long stretch of the cable connecting Tonga to the world, and it took it all out. Like, literally, Tonga lost internet connection entirely. There was no internet connection. Like, the government didn't have internet connection. They actually didn't have internet connection, I think, for a while to actually send the messages out to ask for some people to come and try and reinstall the internet.
It's just Tonga's gone dark.
So Tonga went dark, and therefore kind of plummeted 100 years into the past. I mean, the bank had to send out a USB drive every day to its various branches to update the customer accounts. You know, I mean, the health ministry wasn't able to access files on people. I mean, businesses shut down. For sure. I mean, it's true. I completely agree. Like, we often really don't appreciate the kind of materiality of the internet. We think it's this kind of vaporous thing that's everywhere at once. Oh, Wi-Fi's everywhere. But not these.
It's a very vulnerable infrastructure.
Yes, it's a tiny little bit of glass. It's a tiny little bit of glass that we run under the ocean.
So then, let's go to a bit of a pop culture on that, because
Okay.
Netflix have brought out some great movies in the past couple of years, but the one that's very much on the cybersecurity side of things, the one that actually made me actually scared was, I'm not sure if you watched it, Leave the World Behind.
I've not watched it.
So the reason that it was so terrifying was Barack Obama was one of the executive producers. It's not because I'm scared of Barack Obama, but it was because of if there were three things to destabilize a nation state, one is cut off communication, the second is spread disinformation, and then the third is to I can't remember the third, so I'll come back to that one. But those two in and of themselves it left me with a real sense of this. The fact that the former president of the United States has been the executive producer in this tells me that somebody at some stage has told him that there is either plans for this or there is we have contingencies for this in place. But it really made me think about how fragile all of this is. Like, all of this, these lights, the streaming, the our access to information and to communication could go away like that.
Yeah, fragile, multi-layers fragile. And I would say fragile in the cables, fragile in our reliance on hyperscalers, all the way through to the fragility of the social fabric that winds around all of us. And I think probably, I don't know what Barack Obama did in the film, but the idea that disinformation or information warfare can kind of, especially at moments of crisis, like really rip a nation apart, definitely true. I mean, I spend a lot of my waking life pulling apart and trying to understand information warfare campaigns from autocrats.
Yeah, I mean, look, I believe the saying is we're only 3 meals away from anarchy. And I think we saw that during COVID.
Right.
Of the hoarding of food, toilet paper, other necessities and things like that. So I suppose the way that I'd love to end this, Carl, is one reason for us to be optimistic on where we're going from a technological perspective. We've touched on a lot of stuff. We've touched on a bit of dark stuff there at the end, but let's go with one reason to be optimistic.
Digital democracy. Like, the world is so massively redesignable, and that's for good and for bad. And so I over the summer, I hosted Reid Hoffman, who some people might know, the founder of LinkedIn in London. And I was kind of a bit of a gloomer. That's what I spent most of my life doing, is kind of being gloomy. And
well, you're a Brit.
I'm a Brit. I'm a Brit. The research is online harmed. Of course, I'm going to be gloomy. But Reid was like, he was like, look, progressive politics has to imagine a better world as well. That's as important as knowing about all the problems, because the world as it is for many people like quite bad, right? And so we have to like actually reimagine something better. And nowhere is that clearer to me than the people that are trying to build new ways of doing democracy. I was massively inspired by Taiwan. I went there with the BBC to do a documentary a couple of years ago. And actually, so my tiny little part of this is right now in Camden in North London, my think tank is deploying a new form of digital democracy for local government. So we think that there's the power, a huge amount of power in a different algorithm, not the one that optimizes engagement. It's called bridge-based ranking.
Okay.
And it can basically find consensus amongst often very disparate and sometimes very polarized groups. And we're basically deploying that. We've been designing the process with local governments for ages, and it's basically going to very hopefully reform adult social care, a very, very important bit that local government does, by bringing thousands of people into that decision that Camden will then enact. So, and it's not just that, there's lots of people around the world that are in different ways, I think, trying to find ways of making technology to make democracy more responsive to people. And I think that's an amazing thing, We don't have to just elect people and then send them on a horse to Parliament anymore. We can actually involve people in day-to-day decision-making far more efficiently, and we need to. So,
I mean, the Greeks were able to do it.
The Greeks were able to do it, and the Romans were able to reinvent it, and the Enlightenment re-understood it, and the end of the English Civil War in the 17th century were able to redo it, and all of that, I think, has proved that like democracy doesn't have to be this like stolid, ossified thing. It can be a living, breathing, dynamic social technology.
Yep.
Really.
And on that note, I believe that the US government's about to reopen, so
hallelujah.
It would never have been shut down if we had those types of technologies. Carl, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Thanks, everyone.